Welcome. Welcome on this Labor Day weekend. I'm glad to see you here. Okay, so, because this is a holiday weekend, a few months ago, one thing we did is we seated kind of everybody in a circle and we had people share. So there may become times in this talk when I just call on you to share, because what we're going to be talking about is work. We're going to be talking about jobs, how we approach our jobs, the sacred in our jobs, just a new way to think about work. So if you have a thought that comes to you, just say it, because sometimes that's fun. We actually tried to put the chairs in a circle sometimes, and I'm not quite sure it worked. We may try it again, but if you have something that comes to mind, just let me know, because it's a holiday weekend, so we're just going to be a little loose. Anyway, as this is a holiday weekend, it's now a tradition, because it's probably the third or fourth time, I have to tell you a little bit about the holiday, and I have to give you a little bit of trivia about the holiday, because it's fun. So, Labor Day. For those of you who may know, Labor Day began as a movement beginning in the late 19th century to ameliorate conditions of workers. It started basically as manufacturing grew and started to supplant agriculture as a major employer in our nation's economy. It was first celebrated in 1882 by the Central Labor Union in New York City by a massive parade of 10,000 workers, all of whom had to take the day off and none of whom got paid for it. It started off with like 200 workers, and then more people came, and finally they had 10,000 workers walking down New York. Labor Day became a federal holiday in 1894 in response to the deaths of a number of workers in the Pullman postal strike. Okay, here's my trivia question. Who knows what president signed the Labor Day legislation into law? I love this part of the talks. Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland. Okay, who else knows another interesting bit of trivia about Grover Cleveland? Lori's laughing. It's like, oh my God. Grover Cleveland was the only president to leave the White House and return for a second term 4 years later. Yes, he had 2 terms that were not sequential. Now see, you learned something today. Yeah, seriously. He was the first Democrat elected after the Civil War as well. Okay. Since the Labor Day holiday was enacted in 1894, working people, the effort on behalf of working people has given rise to a great many other benefits that we now take it as given. Some of them are the 8-hour workday, unemployment benefits, workers' compensation, health insurance through your employer, and the prohibition on child labor. All these are outgrowths of the workers' movement, which was first commemorated in 1894 by Labor Day. Before Labor Day was put in place, before these workers' improvements were put in place, it was common for workers to have to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and children as young as 5 were working in factories in unsafe, hazardous conditions. So, we can all give thanks for the improvements that were brought about by Labor Day. So, Labor Day is the national holiday in which we celebrate the achievements of the working person, the working man or woman, right? Everywhere we look around you, we see the results that are brought to us by the honest labor of men and women. I mean, think about how you got here this morning, what you drove on, what you put on, what you ate, that you took a shower, that it worked. I mean, let's just take a minute and think about everything in our lives that is the result of someone else's labor for our benefit. Sometimes we don't think of that, but it profits us sometimes to sit and think about it, because so much of what we do is the benefit to us of the labor of so many other people. We are blessed and lucky to be the recipients of so much creativity, perseverance, and just sheer genius. Now, the same is true for those who work to build and create results that we may not see. Those who teach our kids, those who heal us when we're sick, those who sing a song when we need to hear some music, those who take care of our elderly, our disabled, all those who sell us things, who provide services. We may not see what they do, but the fabric of our society in the U.S. and globally is made up of millions who contribute their gifts, their genius, their creativity to make our lives better. We celebrate all of that on Labor Day, and it behooves us to take a minute and just think about it. So as I was thinking about it, I started thinking about how we in our culture regard labor. And I started thinking that we're just a little schizophrenic. Do you know what I mean by that? We are just a little off. Because if you have a job, if you work for a salary, you regard yourself as just, what do you call it, a working stiff. You know, I just have a job. And we venerate people who have so much money that they just live off their money. They're wealthy. They live off of capital. And I know I'm sounding like a communist. I'm really not. But there's a kind of a schizophrenia in our society because we look at people who are so rich they don't have to work. And I'm not dissing those folks. But sometimes we take the respect that should be accorded those who just work and create and pitch in. And we say, I don't want to be like them. I want to be like him because he has so much money he doesn't have to work. Now, having so much money you don't have to work, a feeling of abundance, a fear of lack, that's the subject for another talk. What I'm doing now is talking about how we feel about having to work, how we look at people who have to work. In Japan, they call folks who actually go to a job, they call them salarymen. Salarymen. Because that's what we do. That's what we all do. We all go to work and we all earn money. We're all kind of salarymen. We're ordinary working people. But sometimes we tend to think there might be something a little wrong with that we kind of diss ourselves because we have to get up and go to a job. We don't respect ourselves for the honest, the creative, the hard work that we do, for the contribution that we make. So I think Labor Day is a great day to kind of rethink that attitude. Perhaps it's time to consider that our work, whatever it is an expression of us. It's an expression of our creativity, of our gifts, of our love, of our skill, brought out for the benefit of others. I just love what Linda read from The Prophet by Gibran. It's a beautiful articulation of what work is. When you work with love, you bind yourself and to one another and to God. What is it like to work with love? How many of us get up every day and go to work and say we are going to work with love? Not a lot of us. Good, I'm so glad. That's great, that's what we need to do. Sometimes it's a challenge, though, in our everyday jobs, is to take every act we do and commit it to the benefit of the greater good, to commit it to our own divine essence. I think part of our mistake is that sometimes, especially in the West, we tend to separate the secular from the sacred. We tend to think, okay, so this is Sunday, so we're going to go do spiritual things, and then the rest of the week we're just going to drive down 400 and go to work. Don't we sometimes do that? Part of our challenge, and a challenge that we embrace in this community, is to bring the spiritual into every aspect of our lives because it's there anyway. Our lives are spiritual. Every step we take, every choice we make, every breath we breathe is a manifestation of us as spiritual beings, having a very human experience. The challenge is to know that everything we do is a reflection of that, right? So we can't really separate the sacred from the secular, but we sometimes tend to do that. In his book, How Then Shall We Live, Wayne Mueller writes, many of us incorrectly assume that a spiritual life begins when we change what we normally do in our everyday life. We feel we must change our job, our living situation, our relationship, our address, our diet, or our clothes before we can truly begin a spiritual practice. Have you ever thought that? I just got to change things before I can really be spiritual? And yet it is not the act, but the awareness, the vitality, and the kindness we bring to our work that allows it to become sacred. Maybe a thought to consider today is that our work can be and is an expression of our innate essence as divine beings here on this earth. That it can be a way how we choose to express our devotion, our divinity, our connection. I've spoken before about Brother Lawrence. Who here has heard of Brother Lawrence? Okay, Thomas. Brother Lawrence was a lay brother in a Carmelite monastery near Paris in the 17th century. He became a soldier as a young man. He fought in the 30 Years' War. I actually did some research on the 30 Years' War, so if anybody has any historical questions, you can see me afterwards. He was injured, and he joined the monastery. He spent the rest of his life working in the kitchens, about the lowliest job he could possibly do. But he did it with such devotion, with such inner peace, with such focus and such simplicity that people from hundreds of miles away would come and talk to him to find out what his secret was, how he managed to do it, how he managed to personify devotion to God. And we can call it spirit, we can call it the divine, we can call it source, we can call it whatever we call it. For him, he called it God. How he managed to do that in the simple act of cleaning up the kitchen and washing pots and pans and bowls. The wisdom he gave actually has been recorded in a book called The Practice of the Presence of God, and I recommend it to you. It's a wonderful book. I have it. You should read it. It's just conversations with Brother Lawrence. He believed that the spirit in which one approached a job as a devotion to the divine made all the difference, and the status of the job was immaterial. He wrote this: "The time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer, and in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great tranquility as if I were upon my knees before the Blessed Sacrament." How many of us would love to be able to do that? I don't know about you, but the week I went through was the week I call from HE, as my daughter Catherine would say, HE double hockey sticks. And the last thing I felt was close to the presence of God. But actually preparing this talk is wonderfully helpful, because I have tried to approach each little task I do as an act of devotion, an act of focus, an act that brings me closer to the divine. As I was researching this talk, I came across a great article called On Momotony and Sacred Work. Momotony and Sacred Work. It's by a lady named Glennon Doyle Melton. She defined momotony as doing things all day that just get undone, and then doing the same things the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. She's a mom. Momotony. She writes about finding the sacred in these mundane tasks. She writes, "It's a monk's work. Mothers are like monks. We do manual labor, we serve others, we nurse the sick, we feed the hungry, and comfort the sad. We sing, we teach, we pray, and practice patience." Oh my God, don't we? The work of a mother is repetitive. We fold the clothes, we wash the bowls, we sing the same song and read the same bedtime story every night. But that work is our prayer. We express our love through service so that service becomes a spiritual discipline. As mothers, we devote our lives to love and ask for nothing in return but peace and joy for our children. Isn't that true? Don't you as a mother want your child to go through life untouched? Nothing but a song on his or her lips skipping through the fields of life? Did that happen to us? I think not. But that's what we want. I don't know what we're on, but that's what we want. So mothers, she writes, the next time someone asks, "What did you do today?" please take the time to answer accurately. "You did not clean the bathroom." This response would be like Annie Leibovitz saying, "Oh, I stood around and pushed some buttons." Not. No. Today you did the holy work of raising human beings. With each word spoken or unspoken, with each offering of forgiveness, you show your children what it means to be brave and kind. The mundane becomes holy, the ordinary, extraordinary. What if we brought that thinking to every act we did? Sometimes it's hard, especially when the idea is a new one. It's like Gibran said. We are so used to thinking that work is a burden. Work is something to get past. Work is something to get done. What if we switched it around? And we looked at it as work, as an opportunity to serve, to bring our creativity and our essence and our love to the world, because it's ours to do. Our jobs, as long as we have them, are ours to do. And we have a choice, we have an option in how we present to the world, how we present our work to the world. We know here at New Thought that every act we do creates an energy, right? We know that every thought we think creates an energy. So wouldn't it be wonderful if every energy we created was to the greater good? Sometimes, if I'm facing a job that I really dislike, and it's a long list, I affirmatively try to dedicate whatever I'm feeling, be it bad, be it good, be it mixed, to the well-being of all sentient beings, to quote a Buddhist phrase. I do. I affirmatively say, I dedicate my emotion, my effort, my boredom, whatever it is that's going on, to the well-being of all sentient beings. Because what it does is it takes whatever I'm feeling and it gives it a purpose. It gives me a focus to improve. It brings meaning to whatever I am doing. And I can do that for myself, and you can do that for yourself. All it takes is focus and being present to what is going on, and an intention to benefit the greater good. So expressing love through service is not limited to mothers or monks. We can all do the same. Every one of us has that opportunity. Here, in this community, in One World, we know that we have joined our work, our sweat, our efforts to the greater good of this community, and we have all benefited individually from it. Don't we know that? Even though we're now out of our building, do you remember when we put it together? Do you remember the work we did, the painting we did, the love we did? Would it have been the same if we had pooled our money and just given a couple $1,000s to somebody else to do it? Would it have been the same? Would we be the same community we are now? Would we have the bonds we have now? Would we have the understanding and the love we have now? We would not. It was by rolling up our sleeves, getting our hands dirty, and doing it together, expressing love through service. It makes a difference. Sister Joan Chittister wrote an article back in 2010. She captioned, "Labor Day, a Spirituality of Work." And actually, I have it. I'm going to put it up on our new website. That's a pretty good segue into our new website, don't you think? Which I hope everybody has seen, because this PDF is going to be on it. Anyway, she wrote an article called "Labor Day, a Spirituality of Work." She wrote that spirituality of work is based on a heightened sense of sacramentality. A heightened sense of sacramentality, of the idea that everything that is holy, and that our hands consecrate it to the service of the divine, whatever we perceive the divine to be. Whatever we do, large or small, think back to Brother Lawrence, we become the creators of a new universe. We are co-creating. We know that in New Thought. We are co-creating beauty, love, and service. It's a really good article. Let me just read a couple quotes from it. She writes, "A spirituality of work immerses me in the search for human community. I begin to see that everything I do, everything, has some effect on someone somewhere. I begin to see my life tied up in theirs. I finally come to know that my work is God's work, unfinished by God, because God meant it to be finished by me." Think about that. As we breathe into that thought, because God meant it to be finished by us. It is for this reason that our participation in action, in work, matters. It's by involving our presence, our creativity, our gifts, that we bring our love and our energy and our creative spirit back to the community. As I was getting ready for this talk, I read a statistic that says 65% of Americans don't like their jobs. Wow. Just imagine if they were able to switch that around. If they were able to see the choices they have in the work and the energy and the love they bring. Every phone call, every meeting you don't want to go to, every person you see. I read once that the most important face in the world is the face that's immediately in front of you. Just imagine if every interaction we were able to breathe and see the face of God, even in that person who sits in the puka next to us, who makes us nuts. We've all had that person. You know, they say that they're our best teacher. Maybe this is one of the lessons they're teaching, is that we have the chance to do this, to just keep breathing and realize that we are the presence of love wherever we are. At work, in our car, sitting here, wherever. And sometimes it's hard. I remember when I was a young naval officer, I worked in the Navy Annex, which was right up the hill from the Pentagon. The Navy Annex is no longer there because it was like really old, but they got rid of it. But I worked there for a number of years when I was first commissioned. And I sat in a cubicle near a window that looked out over Arlington Cemetery. And I was so out of my depth in this job. I was so unhappy that I literally looked out those windows and I envied those people because they were dead. I was like 25. Yeah. It has taken me many years to realize that I don't have to think that way. None of us have to think that way. That there are choices we make. If we hate a job that much, we can get a new job. If we find we can't bring our gifts to it, we can look for some other type of work. If we can't find some other type of work, because finding new jobs is hard. We can still do what we can to bring our love, our peace, and our creativity to the job that we have, to the people we see every day, many of whom may feel the same way we do. I worked in a place once where pretty much nobody ever liked working there, and they were all looking for other jobs. And I said, well, until you find another one, just remember that you are a spot of peace, a light of love right here. And that may bring you some comfort. And for people it did, because it gave them a purpose for being there, for helping others just get through a workplace situation that was very challenging. So I want to share with you today some writings, before I close, from the Bhagavad Gita on action. Now, it's appropriate that I do this today because today, September 5th, is a holiday that is celebrated by Hindus around the world. It is the holiday of the birthday of Krishna Janmashtami. The holiday is called Krishna Janmashtami, and it's the celebration of the birth of Lord Krishna. For those who are familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, it's the story of Lord Krishna and his shepherding Arjuna through a major battle. So I like the fact that we're talking about this today. The Bhagavad Gita is book 7 of a much larger poem, the Mahabharata, which is an epic that tells the story of two warring clans, two warring branches of the same family. One is the Pandavas, which is led by the hero Arjuna and 4 of his brothers. The Gita takes place on a battlefield at the very beginning of the war. The Gita, initially, it's not one of the Upanishads, but it's become such a central story and such a central lesson that it kind of has been elevated to the status of one of the Upanishads. For those who are familiar with Hindu, for lack of a better term, scripture, the Upanishads were written between 900 and 200 BCE, and they are basically writings from wisdom teachers. The translation of Upanishad means sitting near. And it's people who just wrote down what these people said, wisdom that we still take lessons from today. But the Gita takes place on a battlefield at the beginning of the war. Arjuna has his charioteer, who unknown to him, but we find out later is the Lord Krishna, drive him out into the field between the two armies. And Arjuna confesses his dread at having to kill his relatives, having to do battle with his kin. He refuses to fight. He says he's going to do nothing. He drops his arms. He just says he cannot do it. Krishna spends the next 17 chapters teaching Arjuna about duty, action, attachment, life and death, the nature of transcendental reality, and the spiritual path. For those who have not read the Gita, I truly urge you to do it. It is a wonderful, wonderful book. Gandhi carried it with him everywhere. He's quoted as saying, "Whenever doubts haunt me and disappointments stare me in the face and I see not one ray of hope on the horizon, I turn to the Bhagavad Gita and find a verse to comfort me. I immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow." Just take a minute and pick it up. It's a wonderful book. And there are many good translations. I can talk to you about that if you want some recommendations. Emerson, Thoreau, they were all devotees of the Gita. But the lessons that Krishna taught Arjuna are also instructive for us as we think about the need for action and the value of work and action and the meaning that we find in our jobs. He taught that we take action for its own sake. And this is an important thought. We often rush through our jobs. We try to get to the end. We just want to check it off. Remember when we talked about journeys and we talked about the importance of taking a journey? Working a job is the same thing. The way you find meaning in your job, you find devotion, you find a way to express your creativity is by focusing on the job, by focusing on what you are doing, not just on getting it done. That was Krishna's lesson to Arjuna, is we are people of action. But action becomes sacred when we do it for its own sake and not for the result. The Gita reads, "One who shirks action does not attain freedom. No one can gain perfection by abstaining from work. Indeed, there is no one who rests for even an instant. All creatures are driven to action by their own natures. Do any actions you must do, since action is better than inaction." And you can substitute work for action. Work is who we are. It's how we express. Even the existence of your body depends on necessary actions. The whole world becomes a slave to its own inactivity, Arjuna. If you want to be truly free, perform all actions as worship. And that's what we're talking about here. Doing them for their own sake. Doing them to bring your essence and your spirit to the task. That is what frees you up. That is what gives you a sense of achievement, of wholeness, of contribution. Lord Krishna is really kind of teaching the same lesson as Brother Lawrence. How cool is that? Do it for its own sake. Do it for the sake of the divine, to bring your essence, to manifest your own essence in this work. So how do we apply this in our own lives? We focus on what we're doing. We don't just rush to get through it. Thich Nhat Hanh writes about doing dishes. He writes about the joy of doing dishes. He writes about having his arm in the hot water, about having the soap running all over his hand, about the joy of just scrubbing each dish. This is Thich Nhat Hanh, who has better things to write about. But that is where, for that moment, he finds his joy, where he brings his expression. We can do the same. Even when you're doing things that are small, that like monotony, need to be done again. Making the bed, cleaning up the kids, doing the laundry. Just breathe. Think about what you're doing and devote it to the greater good. Can anybody think of any other examples how we bring meaning to our work? I've been doing a lot of talking here. Anything else? What do you guys do? I know if you're like me, you're sometimes in a huge rush. You just want to get it done. You want to check it off your to-do list. That is how you rob yourself of meaning. Getting it done just to get it done, these wisdom teachers teach us, does not really bring that much to the party.